very good morning to all of you. Today's discussion is about the regulatory affairs, a brief introduction. This topic is a very essential one, especially when we are concerned of pharmaceutical industry in India or abroad. As we know, India is one of the biggest generic market supplying the biggest source of generic medicines worldwide. Regulatory affairs become an important issue. So let us go for the topic. This is an introductory session which says everything in brief. First thing is why we need a regulation. We know that we deal with the drugs. The drugs are the life giver, but a wrong drug can even take one's life. So, the safety concern of the patients who are taking the drugs are very important. The past history experiences in last century or before that, as we can see, says that there is a necessary requirement for a good regulation by the government to control the unwanted use of drugs. It was found that first report, I'm just saying it off, in 1848 when a young girl from North England died for receiving the chloroform. Still, the chloroform was used as anesthetic purpose. Later in 1893, the commission exhorted English doctors, including the doctors in the colonies, all reported the deaths caused by the anesthesia, that is chloroform, and the results were published in the Lancet. Later, in 1937, there were 107 deaths in US because of the use of sulfanilamide elixirs, basically due to its excipient diethyl glycol, which was mainly used as its vehicle or solvent. In 1938, Doutwet supposed that acetyl salicylic acid could cause melena. Further, in 1960, it was reported the greatest tragedy of all on drug safety. We know it as thalidomide tragedy. This is what it happened. So, in 1938, initially, after the incident of the diethyl glycol, in 1938, the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act was established and the public health system was renovated. The FDA was given the authority to determine the safety concerns and to determine the regulations related to the safety concerns of the drug. And the time went on, and now we are in the era of pharmacovigilance, where even we report the adverse drug reactions which occurs to the individual patients, which is maintained by WHO in its monitoring center at Uppsala. Anyhow, so it is clear that there is a necessity of maintaining the safety concern of the patients, which resulted in stringency of the regulations for the drugs to be marketed in the particular country. So that brought about the issue of regulatory affairs. The first thing we should know is what is regulation. So regulation, as per dictionary, a rule or directive made and maintained by an authority. Here the authority is the government authority who gives the order or issues the rights to sell the medicine to the particular country. The regulatory affairs associated with the pharma are generally deals with the directives set for a new drug or a generic drug imported to get them to get the market and to get it marketed in the particular country. Different countries have different rules. Maybe the platform might be the same, but there might be some variations of the compliance requirement, and that results in the difference in the approval terms. Currently, the ICH guidelines, which is established, forms a common platform for almost all the regulatory guidelines set up by various countries. Now, the second issue of concern for the students is the regulatory affairs as a profession. So, we should know that in India, regulatory affairs is a shining profession. There is a very good scope of regulatory affairs in our country. Let us go why it is so important to have a regulatory affairs in our country. The main reason is a major portion of the leading pharma companies in India are actually making their money out of selling the drugs to the various countries abroad. And when they are selling the drugs to the different country have its own regulatory compliances, and there should be a team within the company to look after the issue so that they may get the clearance for marketing of the drug in that particular country. So in that way, of course, the regulatory department plays a life-saving role for the particular pharma company. In India, as I told before, it's a generic ground where we prepare generic drugs in preference to other newly drug developments, and we are one of the leading supplier of the generic medicine worldwide. So that's the reason the regulatory affairs become very important in India. So what are the responsibilities of the professionals involved in regulatory affairs? First one is just to keep a track and to check the changes occurring in the legislation or the guidelines for the approval process to various regions across the globe where the particular company wishes to market its product. Next, advising legal and scientific restraints and requirements to the various departments and to the management of the particular company. Collecting, collating, and evaluating the various scientific data that is related to the quality, safety, and efficacy from the various departments of the pharma company, and to set up the values or the data in terms of the guidelines. Presenting registration documents to the regulatory agencies. So after processing, they will present the data to the regulatory agencies, and subsequent negotiation with the regulatory agencies regarding the further requirement of any such things. It also supplies strategic and technical advices so that proper document can be obtained from various departments of the company. Lastly, helping the company to avoid problems caused by badly kept records, inappropriate scientific thinking, or poor presentation of data. So this is a very critical issue of concern. So let us think, what does a regulatory personnel do for a company. The major problem for a company is the compliance to market a product, maybe in its country or in other countries. The problem is to set up the data in a correct fashion, in correct way, so that they may get their finished products to be sold in that particular company, a particular country. So that's why they go for hiring of regulatory agents or consultants or personals, and always the management of the company looks with only one attitude, that is to help them so that they may undergo all the compliances successfully to register their formulation in the particular country. And of course, a good regulatory personnel can deal with any kind of compliances at any situation and can prove to be the profit making person, the person who is responsible for making profit of the company. So this is what the functioning of a regulatory affairs unit. It actually gets the raw data. So raw data doesn't mean that it is not organized data, but it is not as per the requirement of the guidelines or compliance of the particular country. So those data are processed, analyzed, and technical advices are even given as a feedback so that they can change the data, and they process the data in the regulatory affairs units, and they prepare this data as per the requirements of the particular country and their guidelines to produce CTDs, that is common technical document, electronic CTDs, that is a soft version of the document, drug master file DMF, and as well as dossiers. So these are the final documents that generally comes out of a regulatory agency. So if you see the triangle over here, the CDDs what we generally submit has 4 different modules or 4 chapters. The first module actually deals with the administrative information. The second module gives a small or a brief overview about the quality, non-clinical as well as the clinical studies. Next, module 3 exclusively deals with the data required to justify the quality of the product. Module 4 related to the non-clinical study, that is a toxicological study or preclinical study. And last, module 5, that is entirely related with the clinical study. So this is important thing which we have to be concerned of. Now this is an chart to make you understand the various phases that are going on parallelly in an industry, and there is its impact on the regulatory department also. So generally we start off a drug development system, we end up with lot of you can say compounds, study compounds. It is said that the total process for a drug development takes place to be around 15 years, and the division is like for preclinical it is 6.5, for your clinical studies it is almost around 7 years, and for the review approval, final approval, it takes another 1 year to 2 years. So it's around 15 to 16 years are required for a complete drug approval, new drug if it is. If it's a new drug, of course it takes this much time. So obviously you can see over here the requirements in terms of the test population, the purpose of the study, and the success rate. I would like to concentrate on the success rate. You can see over here there are around 5,000 compounds which is reaching the preclinical testing. So out of this preclinical testing, hardly 5 enters the clinical study. And out of this 5 which is entering into the clinical study, there is a chance that one can only be approved by the FDA. So, in this total process, there is also the role of the regulatory agency, the regulatory bodies. The Regulatory Affairs Department files investigational new drug application to the FDA in order to conduct the clinical studies. So, if FDA is satisfied with the preclinical studies, they give the nod for doing the clinical study. So, after completion of the phase 3 clinical study, the regulatory bodies, regulatory affair department again submits a new form, that is new drug application form, to FDA. So while submitting this new drug application form to FDA, it suggests that it has passed all the required tests and they need to get the final approval. So later on the phase 4 comes. So this is actually to make you understand the time and the duration for a new drug development. And that is why in India we are much concerned, because frankly speaking the Indian companies cannot take this much risk for a new drug development. So they generally go for generics. Frankly speaking, just like for new drug application, there is a separate provision and consideration for the generics. You should remember the generics are the established drugs and are running in the market. So probably the concerns regarding the safety and efficacy of the drug is not questionable. So for this consideration, it was in 1984 that Waxman Hatch Act came into existence. It suggested that there should be an abbreviated mechanism for the approval of generic copies of all the drugs originally approved after 1962, by stating the preclinical and clinical testing does not have to be repeated for the generics. So it said no need to go for your preclinical and clinical studies because the safety and efficacy is already established. So what the thing they want to have a bioequivalence study data of the formulation with the standard formulation which is available in the market over the country. So this is the initiation, and actually as a result of it, you can see over here these are the various headline criteria that has to be fulfilled for new drug application, that is chemistry, manufacturing control, labeling, testing and release, animal study, there is a toxicological study, clinical study, and bioavailability. These total 3 issues are being replaced by only one consideration, that is bioequivalence. So you can get it, you can get an idea about that abbreviated new drug application. You can say this as abbreviated new drug application. We are concerned of bioequivalence study. Probably you know what is bioequivalence study. So bioequivalence study is actually replacing the safety and efficacy consideration, and is actually making the process of compilation much easier. So regulatory department of the company will be taking the path. In India actually we generally are much concerned of ANDA, and to a certain extent a lesser amount we go for new drug applications. Actually, this is a map to make you understand the diversity of the regulatory agencies across the globe. Some countries are grouped together because they have their regulations almost similar. Such countries include CIS and Russia. The CIS countries are the countries which came out of the Soviet Union, that is Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. So all those countries comes under the CIS country. Next is the Asian countries. Actually, Asian countries here we mainly concerned of the Southeast Asian countries, which includes Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore. So those countries are concerned. We have GCC countries. These are the Gulf countries. So these Gulf countries are also having, you can say, a similar type of guidelines. Okay. Next, we have Latin American countries. So LATAM is actually Latin American countries. Apart from that, we have some standard, we generally call it as a superior or standard regulatory guidelines that are set up by FDA USA, HSSC Health, that is Health Canada, Senate Canada, MHRA for England, EMEA, that is European Medicines Evaluating Agency. This is somewhat related for the Europe. And of course for Australia this is TGA. So you should know what are the important regulatory agencies across the globe, because they will help you a lot for preparing the CTDs or other technical documents as per the guidelines and the compliance. So this is an depiction which I told just now. You can see there are some minor changes if we move the what do you call the compliance required for Asian countries to GCC countries, from GCC to LATAM countries, and from LATAM to CIS countries. There will be some slight variations of the data requirements based on the quality, safety and efficacy. So the concerned specialist on regulatory affairs has to keep all these things in mind so that he or she can take a proper decision while going for the filing process of the you can say the technical documents. Now this is actually I thought of giving it, but it is not working. So this you can see on the screen. This is actually the list of the various we can say regulatory authorities website in WHO. So the WHO is maintaining almost all the countries' websites that is related to the drug safety and efficacy, or you can say it is related to the drugs what do you call permission for selling or marketing the drugs in the particular country. So hope so you understand. Welcome. Today the topic of discussion is